strong support for Iran's right to protect its sovereignty and dignity. Meeting with Tianjin with Iranian Foreign Minister Sayed Abbas Araghchi, Wang spoke about bullying and power politics. Wang emphasized the close partnership between China and Iran, highlighting their efforts to build trust and work together for long-term cooperation. Araghchi thanked China for its important support and praised China's leadership role in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. They also addressed the sensitive issue of Iran's nuclear program. Araghchi made it clear that Iran does not want nuclear weapons, but insists on its right to use nuclear energy peacefully. He said Iran is ready to restart talks with all parties as long as there is fairness and respect. Wang welcomed Iran's peaceful stance and stressed that China opposes the use or threat of force. He said China is committed to helping create dialogue and promote peace and stability in the Middle East. We're now joined by Professor Madhav Nalaput, who's the editor of the Sunday Guardian. He joins us live from New Delhi. Professor Nalaput, thank you very much for joining us. What are your thoughts about these talks between Tehran and Beijing and their foreign ministers? How do you see this relationship?
Look, I'd like to say very clearly that so far as China is concerned, it is friendly with all countries that are hostile to the United States, whether it's Venezuela, whether it's Iran, whether it is any other country. Frankly, Pakistan is objectively hostile to the United States, but I think there are people in the United States who continue to be bamboozled into believing that Pakistan is other than what it is, which is a Chinese satellite. So far as Iran is concerned, China would like to support Iran, there's no question about it. But if I may ask, I mean, I don't see why someone should not question the Chinese on this point, that the ruling party in Iran, essentially the Khamenei, the supreme leader, and the IRGC, the civilian government, is very weak, as is the case in Pakistan. But the reality is, they do not accept the right of Jewish people to exist. They do not accept the right of Israel as a state and the Jewish people as a faith to exist. So in that situation, I mean, what is China doing supporting a side that does not recognize the right of the Jewish people to their own lives, to their very lives, and to the recognition of the state of Israel, who are opposed to that, a state which is recognized by the United Nations, which is the only Jewish state, a Jewish country in the world. And I think the Jews have earned the right to have their country, judging by the terrible price they have paid in the Holocaust in the previous century, and judging by the horror that was inflicted on them on the October 7th Hamas attack. So please, Mr. Bongi, please make your position clear on that. What do you think about the insistence by your good friends that Israel does not have the right to exist as a state and the Jewish people do not have the right to exist as a people? What do you have to say about that?
Professor Nalaput, Iran is actually home to the second largest Jewish population in the Middle East. It was in 2021, 8,500 Jews still do live in Iran. Yes, Iran has said, Iran calls Israel occupied Palestine. However, those statements, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, 8,000 people is what a large apartment block would have. If anyone thinks that's a large number of people compared to a thriving Jewish community that was there before the clerics took over, well, then that individual is welcome to believe so. But it's frankly, it would fill only a single large multi-story apartment block, and not a very, very large, very multi-story apartment block either. It's a very tiny number, and they're there on sufferance, and they know it, and they have to keep repeating praises of the clerics, the very clerics who they know oppose their faith and oppose the state of Israel. to which they have a right to return. If the Iranians are so generous, why not allow these 8,000 and odd Jews to emigrate to Israel, where they'll be welcomed with open arms? I mean, that's the obvious question that I think people need to ask.
Yes, Professor
Thank you.
Nalaput, thank you very much for joining us. China is pushing back against criticism from US politicians over its role in the United Nations. Foreign Ministry spokesman Lin Juan said Washington should view China and bilateral ties objectively and rationally. Speaking in Beijing, Lin responded to claims about China's growing UN influence. He called the remarks ideologically biased and a product of a Cold War zero-sum mentality. Lin said China firmly opposes such thinking. He also urged the US to take concrete steps to foster stable and healthy relations rather than escalate tensions through rhetoric and confrontation. The comments highlight deepening strains in US-China diplomatic engagement. Let's have a look at what the Foreign Ministry spokesperson said.
反映出美国一些政客典型的意识形态偏见和冷战零和思维。中方对此坚决反对。我们敦促美方客观理性看待中国和中美关系，以实际行动推动中美关系稳定、健康、可持续发展，而不是相反。
We're now joined by Professor Madhav Nalaput once again to discuss this further. Professor Nalaput, how does China's defence of its UN influence reflect Beijing's broader ambitions for a reformed global governance order?
Well, look, the fact of the matter is that the CCP top leadership, I'm not talking about the Chinese people. They've got an extremely wonderful, vibrant tradition of thousands of years, and they have exceptional qualities as a people. I'm not even talking about the CCP. I'm not even talking about the top rung of the CCP, but the very highest rung of the CCP. And as far as they are concerned, I mean, what is their definition of objective? Their definition of objective is to be, frankly, subjective, to basically do what the Chinese CCP top leadership wants you to do, flood the markets with goods and take more, nibble at territory and basically do nothing about it. But the fact is, we are now in this era, the era of Cold War 2.0. And in this era, there is an existential conflict that is raging, as existential as was the conflict with the Soviet Union and the democracies in the past. That is a conflict between the authoritarian system, represented especially by the topmost rung of the leadership of the CCP. That Cold War is a reality of life. It cannot be ignored. And the objective reasons for that war. The reason is that the Chinese want to display, the Chinese Communist Party leadership, I will say shorthand the Chinese, they want to replace the US with themselves as the primary power. And that will mean the collapse of the US dollar. It will mean a very rapid decline in the US economy, and the US will fall, will have a precipitous fall in living standards. So the fact of the matter is, their idea of objective is for the US to be doing, basically looking at them as they would want you to look at themselves. I mean, in the case of other countries, they basically tell you be objective, which means we may nibble at your territory. We may hold large areas of a territory, but don't worry about that. You know, you be satisfied with what you have until we take more. And I wouldn't call this being objective at all. So that definition of objectivity is something to be desired.
Professor Madhav